The atmosphere at San Francisco International Airport buzzed with activity as travelers hurriedly moved to catch their flights. The sounds of announcements echoed through the terminal, blending with the chatter of families reuniting and the quick steps of businesspeople rushing to their gates. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with a distinct scent of jet fuel, creating a unique olfactory tapestry that was unmistakably airport life. Families clutched their children's hands, while individuals wheeled their suitcases behind them, weaving through the crowds with purpose. Among the throng was Emily, a 7-year-old girl whose bright blonde hair and curious eyes set her apart from the bustling sea of adults. Dressed in a light blue dress that fluttered gently as she walked, she embodied innocence and vulnerability. Despite the excitement of the airport, a flicker of apprehension danced in her eyes as she clung tightly to her father's hand. Mark, Emily's father, stood beside her, a stern figure absorbed in the glow of his phone. His furrowed brow and distant demeanor contrasted sharply with Emily's wide-eyed wonder. As he typed furiously, it was clear that his attention lay far from the little girl beside him, raising immediate concerns about her emotional well-being. Then there was Daniel, a tall and welcoming flight attendant who was known for his ability to remain calm and courteous in any situation. With a genuine smile that could ease even the most anxious passenger, he was determined to create a positive experience for everyone on board. Little did he know, this flight would challenge his skills and test his resolve in ways he had never imagined. The boarding process was a whirlwind of activity as passengers lined up to enter Pacific Airlines Flight 739, their excitement palpable. For Emily, this moment was a mixture of anticipation and fear. Clutching her father's hand tightly, she felt a rush of emotions wash over her. The prospect of flying filled her with wonder, but it was quickly overshadowed by a gnawing uncertainty about the journey ahead. She could see families laughing and chatting around her, while her father remained preoccupied with his phone, his stern expression offering her little comfort. Each step towards the airplane felt monumental, as if she were leaving behind the familiar and stepping into the unknown. As they approached the plane, Emily stole glances at her father, searching for reassurance in his eyes, but all she found was a man lost in his digital world. The bustling airport terminal faded away as they entered the jet bridge, and the noise was replaced by the humming of the airplane engines and the muffled voices of the crew. The interior of the aircraft welcomed them with a scent of polished leather and an air of anticipation. Emily's heart raced. She felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. The narrow aisle appeared daunting, and she hesitated, her grip on her father's hand tightening even further. Inside the cabin, Daniel was busy preparing for takeoff. With a warm smile and a reassuring presence, he greeted passengers as they settled into their seats. He checked overhead compartments, ensuring they were securely closed, and offered assistance to those who needed help stowing their luggage. His calm demeanor and attentive nature helped ease the tension in the cabin, but as he made his way down the aisle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Emily. Daniel's keen eyes caught sight of her as she and her father settled into their seats in row 12. He noted her wide, curious eyes that darted around the cabin, searching for something, or perhaps someone. Her father, oblivious to her distress, continued typing on his phone, completely unaware of the growing storm of emotions within his daughter. The contrast between Emily's innocent curiosity and Mark's detached demeanor struck Daniel. The little girl seemed to be holding back her fears, and he felt an instinctive urge to help her. As the aircraft prepared for takeoff, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the familiar safety announcements began. The sounds of the engines increased, vibrating through the floor and resonating in Emily's chest. She felt the plane begin to taxi down the runway, her excitement rising, but so too did her anxiety. The sensation of the plane accelerating was thrilling, yet unsettling. Emily turned to her father, hoping for reassurance, but he remained focused on his screen, seemingly indifferent to the monumental moment occurring around them. The moment the plane lifted off the ground was exhilarating. The world outside the window fell away, and the rush of takeoff sent a thrill through the cabin. Daniel moved to reassure the passengers, but his eyes were drawn back to Emily. He could see her small frame tense against her seat, her little hands gripping the armrests as if they were the only thing keeping her grounded. The roar of the engines filled the air, drowning out the chatter of other passengers. In that chaotic moment, Emily's restlessness grew, her eyes darting around as she searched for a way to escape the emotional turmoil brewing within her. Daniel's concern deepened as he recognized that this flight was not just another routine journey. The innocent excitement of a child was juxtaposed with an unspoken fear, and he felt a sense of urgency to uncover the source of her distress before it was too late. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, he resolved to keep a close watch on Emily, knowing that sometimes the most significant battles are fought silently. Once the plane had stabilized in the air, Daniel set about his duties with a practiced ease. He rolled the drink cart down the aisle, offering beverages and snacks to the passengers who settled into their seats. However, his attention kept drifting back to Emily in row 12. Despite the comforting hum of the aircraft and the steady climb into the sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The little girl appeared increasingly agitated, her wide eyes flitting nervously from one side of the cabin to the other, searching as if she were looking for something, or perhaps someone. As Daniel approached her row, he could see the tension etched on her small face. Emily's usually bright expression had faded, replaced by a look of anxiety that made Daniel's heart sink. The carefree laughter of other children around her seemed to amplify her distress, highlighting her isolation in the midst of the crowded cabin. He offered her a gentle smile, hoping to provide some reassurance, but it barely registered with her. Instead, her eyes darted toward her father, who remained oblivious to her discomfort, his face illuminated by the screen of his phone. Just as Daniel moved to the next passenger, Emily reached out and tugged on his sleeve with an urgency that sent a jolt of alarm through him. Her voice was barely above a whisper, filled with an earnestness that betrayed her fear. "Sir, can I talk to you?" she asked, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. In that moment, everything else faded away. Daniel could see that beneath the innocent exterior lay a child gripped by fear. He crouched down to her level, feeling a protective instinct surge within him. "Of course, sweetie. What's wrong?" he asked gently, making sure to keep his tone soothing. The fear in her eyes deepened as she glanced nervously at her father, who remained engrossed in his device. "I'm scared. I don't want to be here," Emily confessed, her voice trembling. The admission struck Daniel like a bolt of lightning. It was clear that something was profoundly wrong. Before Daniel could respond, Emily's father finally looked up from his phone, and his expression shifted instantly. There was a coldness in his gaze as he pulled Emily back toward him, a firm grip on her arm that seemed to communicate a silent command to obey. "Don't bother the flight attendant, Emily," he said, his voice laced with irritation. The dismissive tone and the way he spoke to her deepened Daniel's concern, painting a troubling picture of the dynamics at play. Emily flinched at her father's reprimand, her small shoulders hunching as if she were trying to shrink away from him. Daniel's heart ached for her. She was clearly desperate for help, yet her father's icy demeanor served to further entrench her fear. The unease in the air thickened, creating a sense of foreboding that loomed over the cabin. "Everything is fine, sir," Daniel said, trying to maintain a calm facade as he stood back up, but inside he felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The disconnect between Emily and her father was alarming, and he knew he had to remain vigilant. The routine flight was quickly becoming something much more complex, and Daniel's instinct was to protect the child who seemed to be signaling for help amid the chaos. With a lingering glance back at Emily, whose frightened eyes were still fixed on him, he resumed his service, a storm of worry brewing within him. As the flight continued, Emily's anxiety transformed into determination. With her father still distracted by his phone, she began to make subtle hand signals toward Daniel, desperately trying to communicate something important without drawing her father's attention. She held her hands in her lap, occasionally glancing sideways to ensure her father was still oblivious. The tiny gestures, fingers pointing to her eyes, then to the back of the cabin, were meant to convey urgency, but they were easily lost amidst the bustle of the airplane. Daniel, while serving drinks to other passengers, caught glimpses of her attempts. Each furtive movement ignited a wave of frustration within him. He felt a growing sense of urgency to decipher her signals. What was she trying to say? Was she truly in danger? The uncertainty gnawed at him, compelling him to find a way to help her without alarming anyone, especially her father. He was keenly aware that any misstep could escalate the situation. During a brief moment of respite, Daniel seized the opportunity to consult with his colleague Sarah, who was stationed at the back of the plane. He quickly explained the situation, outlining Emily's strange behavior and her obvious distress. "I think something is seriously wrong," he said, his voice low and urgent. "She's been trying to communicate with me, but her father doesn't seem to care." Sarah's brow furrowed in concern as she listened intently. "It sounds like she might be in trouble," she replied thoughtfully. "We need to find out what she's trying to tell you without alarming her father. It's important we act discreetly." Her eyes darted back toward the front of the cabin, where Mark sat, still engrossed in his phone, seemingly oblivious to the tension around him. With Sarah's encouragement, Daniel devised a plan. He decided to use a notepad and pen to ask Emily directly if she was in danger. The idea felt risky but necessary. It was the only way he could confirm his suspicions without raising any red flags. The thought of putting the little girl in a vulnerable position weighed heavily on him, but he knew he had to act. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Daniel returned to Emily's row. The atmosphere felt charged as he approached, his heart racing. He kept his expression neutral, trying to blend in with the routine of serving drinks. As he neared row 12, he quickly scribbled a note on the notepad. "Are you in danger?" He folded it discreetly and leaned down, hiding the note from her father with his body. Emily's eyes widened as she spotted him. He could see her heart racing beneath the surface, a mixture of fear and hope flickering across her face. She hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously at her father, who remained oblivious. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. This was a pivotal moment. Finally, she reached out, cautiously taking the note from his hand. As her fingers brushed against his, he felt a connection, a silent understanding of the gravity of the situation. Daniel held his breath, waiting for her response. Would she confirm his fears? He remained rooted to the spot, fully aware that every second counted, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. The airplane cabin buzzed with life around them, but for Daniel and Emily, the world outside faded into a blur, leaving only the urgent task of communication hanging in the air. The hum of the aircraft's engines was a steady backdrop as Emily seized the moment to slip away from her father, heart pounding in her chest. The restroom door clicked shut behind her, a brief sanctuary amidst the chaos of the cabin. She leaned against the cool metal of the door, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. The small space felt constricting, yet it offered a semblance of safety, away from the stern gaze of her father, who was still unaware of her flight. When Daniel entered the restroom, he was greeted by the sight of Emily, her small frame trembling slightly. His protective instincts kicked in, and he crouched down to her level, ensuring that his presence was calming. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice low and reassuring. I'm scared," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. "My dad did something bad. He took me without my mom's permission," she confessed, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He said we were moving somewhere else and that I would never see her again. Please, I don't want to go with him." Daniel felt a tight knot form in his stomach at her revelation. Emily's vulnerability tugged at his heartstrings, and he instinctively reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Emily. I promise I'm going to help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He could see the fear etched on her face, and the determination to protect her grew stronger within him. "I can't let him take me away," she continued, her voice breaking as she fought back the tears. "He's scary when he's like this. I don't know what he'll do." "Listen to me," Daniel replied firmly, feeling a surge of resolve. "We're going to get you back to your mom, and we're going to make sure you're safe. But I need you to be brave for just a little longer, okay?" He could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, but he also recognized the weight of the situation pressing down on both of them. He quickly formulated a plan in his mind. "I'm going to inform the pilot about what's happening," he said, his mind racing with the next steps. "We need the authorities to be ready when we land. Can you wait here for just a moment?" Emily nodded, though her expression was a mix of fear and uncertainty. "Stay close to the door," he instructed, gently squeezing her shoulder before stepping out. He hurried to the cockpit, heart pounding as he relayed the situation to the pilot. "There's a young girl on board. She's in danger from her father. We need to inform the authorities to be waiting when we land. I'm worried for her safety." The pilot listened intently, his face growing serious as he absorbed the information. "We'll prepare for a swift landing and ensure the police are ready to intervene." "Thank you for acting quickly, Daniel." With the plan set in motion, Daniel felt a mix of relief and urgency wash over him. He rushed back to the restroom, finding Emily still waiting, though her fear had not fully dissipated. "They're going to help you," he assured her, kneeling beside her again. "You've been so brave, Emily. I promise we'll get through this together." As they made their way back to the cabin, Daniel felt a surge of determination. He would protect Emily at all costs, ensuring that her fears would soon be nothing more than a distant memory. The moment of confrontation with her father was fast approaching, but for now, They had each other, and that was a powerful force against the darkness threatening to envelop them. As the flight continued its journey across the vast expanse of sky, Daniel maintained a vigilant watch over Emily and her father in row 12. He moved through the cabin, serving drinks and snacks, but his focus remained on the little girl whose distress was evident beneath the surface. The atmosphere inside the plane was filled with the mundane sounds of laughter, conversations, and the occasional clinking of cups. However, an undercurrent of tension surged within Daniel, as he felt the weight of Emily's silent plea for help. Most passengers remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding just a few rows away. Families chatted animatedly about their destinations, while children laughed and played games on their tablets. Yet, the contrast with Emily's apprehensive demeanor struck Daniel hard. He noticed how she kept glancing toward her father, who remained engrossed in his phone, oblivious to the anxiety radiating from his daughter. Daniel's concern deepened. He could sense the emotional turmoil brewing beneath Emily's seemingly calm exterior. Suddenly, without warning, the aircraft hit an unexpected patch of turbulence. The plane shook violently, jolting passengers in their seats and causing gasps of alarm to ripple through the cabin. Daniel quickly steadied himself, instinctively reaching out to reassure the passengers nearby. He glanced at Emily, whose wide eyes were filled with fear as the plane dipped and swayed. Her small hands clutched the armrests tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Daniel moved toward her with purpose, leaning close to offer comfort amid the chaos. "It's okay, Emily. This is just some bumpy air. You're safe," he said, projecting calmness into the storm of emotions swirling around them. He could see the fear etched on her face, and he wanted desperately to alleviate her panic. As the turbulence continued to rattle the plane, he offered her a small cup of juice, hoping to distract her from the unsettling experience. "Here, take a sip. It'll help," he encouraged, watching as she slowly took the cup from his hand. However, in that moment of reassurance, Daniel caught a glimpse of something shifting in the air. Emily's father, who had been mostly oblivious, suddenly looked up, a frown creasing his brow as he observed Daniel's interaction with his daughter. The coldness in his gaze intensified, and Daniel felt an instinctive jolt of apprehension. Mark's demeanor shifted from detached indifference to a simmering suspicion as he started to connect the dots. Daniel could feel the atmosphere thickening with tension. He was no longer just a concerned flight attendant. He was now a potential adversary in Mark's eyes. The turbulence subsided, but the emotional turbulence in the cabin only grew. Daniel's heart raced as he realized he needed to remain vigilant, not just for Emily's safety but also to ensure that her father's suspicions did not escalate into something more dangerous. He moved back toward the front of the cabin, his mind racing with thoughts of how to protect Emily while managing the brewing storm that was Mark's ire. As the flight continued, the stakes felt higher than ever, and Daniel knew he had to be ready for whatever might come next. As the plane began its descent toward New York, the cabin buzzed with a low hum of conversation and the rustle of luggage being readied for disembarkation. In the midst of the usual pre-landing activity, Daniel felt the weight of urgency settle heavily on his shoulders. He knew time was running out to ensure Emily's safety, and he needed to act quickly. He sought out Sarah, who was busy gathering supplies in the galley. "Sarah," Daniel said, his voice low but urgent, "we need to discuss a plan for Emily. Her father is starting to notice our interactions, and I'm worried he might become aggressive once we land." Sarah's expression shifted to one of concern. "I've been thinking the same thing," she replied. "We need a strategy to get Emily away from him without alarming her father. Perhaps we can create a distraction during disembarkation." "Yes, that's a great idea," Daniel exclaimed, his mind racing with possibilities. "What about an announcement? Something about a technical issue that requires everyone to exit quickly." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "I can make that announcement as soon as we're on the ground. It'll create enough chaos for us to separate Emily from her father." With the plan solidifying, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had to be prepared for anything, especially considering the emotional volatility of the situation. As they returned to their stations, Daniel took a moment to breathe deeply, steeling himself for what was to come. The plane touched down with a slight thud, the wheels kissing the tarmac as the cabin filled with the sound of engines throttling down. Daniel glanced toward Emily, who was seated next to her father, her expression a mix of fear and anticipation. He moved closer, kneeling beside her seat, determined to reassure her as they prepared for the crucial moments ahead. "Emily," he whispered, keeping his voice steady and calm. "We're almost there, and everything is going to be okay. When we land, I need you to stay close to me. Remember our plan. Just trust me and stay calm." She nodded slowly, her eyes wide but trusting. "What will happen?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "After we land, I'll help you get off the plane quickly. There might be some noise and confusion, but I promise I'll keep you safe," he replied, offering a warm smile to soothe her nerves. "Just focus on me, okay?" As they rolled to a stop at the gate, the familiar sounds of the cabin filled the air, the clicking of seatbelts being unfastened, the rustle of bags being pulled from overhead compartments. Daniel's heart raced as he prepared for the moment of distraction. Sarah stood at the front, ready to make the announcement that would set their plan into motion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience, but we've encountered a technical issue that requires everyone to exit the plane as quickly as possible. Please follow the crew's instructions as we facilitate a rapid disembarkation," Sarah announced, her voice steady and clear. Chaos erupted as passengers began to move, confusion swirling through the cabin. Daniel seized the moment, looking to Emily and gesturing for her to follow him. "Now, Emily, let's go," he urged, his heart pounding as he led her toward the aisle, determination fueling his every step. With Emily close by his side, he could feel the tension crackling in the air. The urgency of their situation propelled them forward, and as they navigated through the throng of passengers, Daniel's protective instincts kicked into high gear. This was their moment to escape the shadows of fear and uncertainty, and he was determined to keep Emily safe at all costs. As the aircraft's wheels made contact with the runway, a wave of tension swept through the cabin. The thud was followed by the roar of the engines as they began to throttle down, and Daniel felt a mix of relief and urgency wash over him. They had made it safely, but the true challenge was just beginning. The crew members exchanged quick glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Each was acutely aware of their roles as they prepared to execute the carefully devised plan to protect Emily. Daniel's heart raced as the plane rolled to a stop at the gate. He glanced back at Emily, who sat with her father, anxiety etched on her small face. He needed to act quickly. As the seatbelt sign flickered off, the cabin erupted with movement. Passengers unbuckled, some eagerly reaching for their belongings, while others chatted excitedly about their travel plans. Daniel pushed through the crowd, his focus unwavering. In the midst of the chaos, Mark began to sense something was amiss. He looked around, his expression shifting from indifference to confusion. He watched as Daniel approached, his demeanor suddenly protective as he leaned toward Emily. Mark's brows furrowed in suspicion, a flicker of concern igniting within him. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low but firm, as he pulled Emily closer to him. "Everything's fine, sir. Just let her come with me for a moment," Daniel replied, trying to maintain his calm. He could feel the tension thickening in the air, his instincts screaming that time was running out. He gently placed a hand on Emily's back, encouraging her to follow. "Come on, sweetheart. We need to get you off this plane safely." Just as they began to move, the situation escalated. The door of the aircraft swung open, and in rushed a group of undercover police officers, their presence commanding immediate attention. "Step away from the girl," one officer shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The passengers froze, their conversations halting as they turned to witness the unfolding drama. Mark's expression twisted into one of alarm as he realized the gravity of the situation. "What is this?" he yelled, pulling Emily protectively against him. "She's my daughter." His voice was filled with a mix of anger and desperation, but Daniel stood firm, stepping between Emily and her father. "Sir, you need to let her go." "She's not safe with you," Daniel asserted, trying to keep his voice steady. The tension in the air was palpable, and he could feel the weight of every passenger's gaze upon them, fear mingling with confusion. The officers advanced, swiftly closing the gap. "We are here to ensure the safety of the child," one officer stated, his tone authoritative. Mark's eyes darted between Daniel and the officers, realizing he was losing control of the situation. Before he could react further, the officers moved in to detain him. Mark struggled briefly, the anger boiling over as he shouted, "This is a mistake. She's my daughter." But the officers, trained for such scenarios, quickly subdued him, handcuffing him with practiced efficiency. The cabin erupted into a flurry of activity, passengers murmuring and whispering, some pulling out their phones to capture the moment. Daniel felt a surge of relief mixed with the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Emily stood beside him, wide-eyed and trembling, yet a flicker of hope shone through her fear as she realized the adults were taking control. "Emily, you're safe now," Daniel said softly, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Everything is going to be all right." As the officers escorted Mark away, the chaos began to settle, but the emotional aftermath lingered, leaving a lasting impact on everyone on board. In that moment, Daniel knew they had crossed a crucial threshold. As the commotion settled and the last echoes of the confrontation faded into the background, Daniel turned to Emily, who stood beside him, her small frame trembling slightly. He knelt down to her level, offering a reassuring smile. "You're safe now, Emily. You did so well," he said softly, feeling a surge of relief wash over him. The fear that had gripped her during the flight slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a glimmer of gratitude in her wide eyes. Emily took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as she processed the reality of her situation. "Thank you for helping me," she whispered, her voice still shaky but filled with warmth. "I was so scared." Tears brimmed in her eyes as she realized the danger she had narrowly escaped. Daniel's heart swelled at her words. He had been worried about her emotional state throughout the ordeal, and seeing her express her gratitude filled him with a profound sense of purpose. Just then, a couple of police officers approached them, their expressions serious yet kind. "Daniel," one of them said, extending a hand, "we want to thank you for your quick actions today. You played a vital role in ensuring this child's safety." Daniel shook their hands, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I just did what anyone would do," he replied modestly, though inside he knew how critical his intervention had been. The officers then turned to Emily, their demeanor softening. "Hey there, Emily," one officer said gently. "We're going to take good care of you from here on out. Your mom is on her way, and we'll make sure you're safe until she arrives." Daniel nodded, relieved to see that they had a solid plan for Emily's safety. The officers explained the next steps, detailing how they would escort her to a secure area where she would be comfortable while they awaited her mother. Moments later, the atmosphere shifted once more as Emily's mother rushed into the terminal, her face a mask of worry and desperation. When she spotted Emily, her expression transformed into one of pure relief. "Emily!" she cried, sprinting towards her daughter, arms wide open. Emily ran into her mother's embrace, and they held each other tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. It was a moment of unfiltered joy and overwhelming emotion, the kind of reunion that made everything they had just endured fade into the background. Daniel stood back, witnessing the heartfelt scene unfold. He felt a swell of happiness at having played a role in their reunion. The bond between mother and daughter was palpable, filled with love and relief, and it was clear they had both emerged from this ordeal forever changed. As Emily pulled back from her mother, she glanced toward Daniel, a smile breaking through her tears. "Thank you for saving me," she said again, her voice filled with sincerity. Emily's mother turned to Daniel, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you so much for helping my daughter. I can't even express how grateful I am," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her appreciation. As they stood there, the warmth of their connection enveloped him, and he realized the true impact of his actions that day. He had not only protected a vulnerable child, but also helped reunite a family in their time of need. It was a profound reminder of the power of compassion and vigilance, and as he left them to gather their things, he knew that stories like Emily's would remain etched in his heart long after the day was over. As Daniel stepped out of the airport and into the cool evening air, a profound sense of reflection washed over him. The day had been filled with unexpected twists, from the bustling atmosphere of the terminal to the heart-pounding moments aboard the flight. He felt a mix of accomplishment and relief, knowing he had played a crucial role in ensuring Emily's safety. However, the weight of responsibility still lingered, a reminder of the urgency and gravity of the situation he had navigated. The memory of Emily's fearful eyes and her whispered pleas for help would stay with him long after this day was over. In that moment of quiet, Daniel realized the importance of vigilance in everyday life. Paying attention to the signs of distress in others, those subtle cues that often go unnoticed, can make all the difference. He had learned that even small actions, like offering a comforting word or a watchful eye, could have a profound impact. It was a lesson he hoped to carry with him as he continued his work in the skies, knowing that lives could be changed with just a little empathy and awareness. As he walked away from the terminal, Daniel held on to the hope that stories like Emily's would inspire others to be vigilant and compassionate. He envisioned a world where people would look out for one another, fostering a sense of community and connection in difficult times. It was this spirit of togetherness that would ultimately pave the way for brighter futures, where no child would feel alone or afraid. Daniel knew that he would remain committed to making a difference, one flight at a time, as he continued to serve not only as a flight attendant but as a guardian for those who needed it most.